We reported on a story about an officer who experienced extreme racism inside of his shift. He was on a text message thread where his white colleagues talked about starting a race war. They were anti-Black Lives Matter, wanted them to die, and the list goes on. In order for him to be in this group, one of his colleagues said that, well, he's actually half white to make him more digestible to the white officers around him. Let's put up a picture of the person in charge of that command unit. His name is Chief Daryl McSwain. He's the chief of the Montgomery County Division and is overseeing the discipline of the officers involved. And I'm going to highlight that. Now, here's what we did in reporting just a few days ago. There was another chief that we highlighted at Indisputable. His name is Stanley. Stanley was not the correct chief, but I'm going to also give you information of how the two got conflated. We were contacted by the Prince George County Division of the Maryland National Park Police. So here it is. The Maryland National County Park is split between Prince George and Montgomery, okay? When researching for the story, the articles that covered the incident showed both. It did not make a distinction between Prince George and Montgomery County. Thus, in the process, we identified the other division and that division chief. That division chief, his name is Stanley Johnson. I apologize to Officer Stanley Johnson. Now, I will give you the background to that story. If you remember, this was about a lawsuit that has been filed by an officer, Mark Miles. Mark Miles of the Maryland National Capital Park Police, Montgomery County, is filing a lawsuit against officers who sent him racist and abusive messages, reported the Daily Record. The suit claims the officer spoke in a group chat about triggering a race war that mentions toward far-right extremist groups. Miles joined the police division in April 2020, becoming the only Black officer on his shift. The lawsuit said those involved were other officers on his shift and a supervisor who often made his race a subject of conversation. Here's what's in the complaint. The complaint alleges that Miles' supervisor in Shift 5, Sergeant Stephanie Harvey, told Miles that other officers in the squad were worried they could not trust him because of his race, as if blackness is somehow a crime. Harvey told Miles that she'd informed the other officers that he was in fact half white and half black. As soon as he was added to the group, Harvey allegedly sent a photo of a black child that said, well, hello, MFer. On another occasion, Harvey texted the group, they want a race war. Okay, let's go. Miles, you're on our side. At least half of you is. That's in written commentary. Harvey did not stop there. According to the complaint, she also proudly proclaimed herself as a racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Then went further to suggest it was time to start killing Black Lives Matter protesters to kick off a civil war. Another officer responded back, Boogaloo is coming, referring to a far-right extremist movement. Per the suit, Harvey was also alleged to be dismissive of racial bias training and claimed racism was simply made up, even though, according to the narrative, she in fact said she's racist. Now, remember, these are people with significant public trust. They have a gun, they have a badge, they have a police report. They are typically trusted by many, not by all, but they have a lot of power. If a person believes you are less than human, that you are something subhuman, that you are in fact the N-word or worthy of their racial and homophobic slurs, do you think they can be fair in their pursuit and application of actual justice? Or do you think the bias of who they are plays out in the profession that they are in? That is what makes this dangerous. That is why this should be covered and highlighted. Once Miles reported these messages to another supervisor, they retaliated against him. Instead of looking into the issue, Miles was removed from the group chat. Now remember, he got all of this in writing, excluded from work events, and even when he called for backup at a high-risk stop, no one showed up. Do you think they give a damn about law enforcement? The lawsuit calls for Harvey to be fired and for the department to monitor employment complaints of misconduct to make sure no one has to go through what Miles did. Miles is also seeking compensation for the physical and emotional distress, humiliation, and embarrassment he endured, reported WTOP News. Okay, now, after we did the initial story, we got a response from the police division. I'm going to read the statement issued. When a series of secret text messages among a group of Park police officers came to the attention of our management, we promptly initiated an investigation and took appropriate action based on the findings of that inquiry. In accordance with the Maryland Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, several officers were suspended, and referred to the disciplinary process for termination. Not fired on the spot, suspended. Some of them were recommended for termination. The statement continues. While we cannot disclose the details of individual personnel actions or pending proceedings, the suggestion that the Park Police Management ignored allegations of misconduct by this group of officers is simply incorrect. And we will make the results of the trial board process public at the appropriate time. Our Park Police leadership team does not tolerate racism or harassment in the workplace and will not hesitate to put a stop to any such behavior whenever it rises. Once again, put up a picture of the chief. Chief Daryl McSwain. Okay, here's the reality, chief, and to the management. You don't have a policy problem, you have a cultural problem. Because the officer took this information to you. According to the officer, I believe him more than I believe you. The officer said you retaliated against him. Kicked him out of the group chat, no longer invited him to events. It was retaliatory, it was retaliation at its best. That's what happened. I do believe his lawsuit. Now, for the individual that I named in a previous report, Chief Stanley, you have my sincere apologies. This brother is the actual problem. Put up his picture again. There's no way in the hell you have a brother in charge of a racist ass shift of police officers, and all they get is a damn suspension, and all of you all are hiding and protecting those cops. I would leak the names personally and then tell you I did it at the press conference. That's how you make an example of cops who do not give a damn about the public trust they have. You make examples out of criminals, do you not? I'm sure you've held a press conference or two and said, we're going to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law and make examples out of those who would dare violate the common trust in this community. Good for you. You got criminals amongst you. What are you going to do? Ben, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different directions here. Like, let's just assume in good faith that all of these police officers that were involved in this lose their jobs. But that wouldn't be enough, would it? Because we would need to make sure that they don't get a job in another police department. Yep. And then we need to be looking backwards into all of the people that they've arrested and why they've arrested these people. Every public defender in the country should have a list of police officers who've said and done things like this, because the truth of the matter is there are probably innocent people who are in prison right now today based off of the testimony of some of these police officers. And I fully believe that. And I think that it's something that is worth following up on. And that's one of the reasons why it's so terrible to have police officers like this, because ultimately, even if somebody's guilty and they're in prison, if you have a police officer like this that's doing and saying all of these things, well, then the entire record of all of the people they put in prison comes into question. And would some guilty people also get let free? Yeah, probably, but that's not their fault. That's these police officers' fault and the police department's fault for allowing this to be the culture that they have.
That's right, very well said. And let me remind everyone, this is truly defunding the police. The police will pay money in order to settle lawsuits, and nobody on the right or the conservative side says, well, that's defunding the police, we should stand against that. Well, good, if you stand against defunding the police, that means you stand against corrupt cops that violate the civil and human rights of citizens. You have to stand against them because they're the ones defunding the police.